At dessert, my daughter's fiancé smiled across the table in English. And then, in Italian, he called me a vacca, a cow, thinking I couldn't understand. By midnight, I had already spoken to a private investigator and made a quiet call to a federal agent. 8 days later, on Christmas Eve, I set the table for dinner and for his arrest. If you enjoy stories where an old man's patience turns into quiet payback, then you're in the right place. Take a moment to subscribe and let me know where you're listening from. Now, let me tell you how it all began. I'm Edward Morales, 66 years old, a retired structural engineer, the kind of man who still straightens picture frames in waiting rooms and counts support beams in church basements. I live on the edge of Denver, in a low brick house that doesn't pretend to be more than it is. The pipes don't complain in winter. The roof doesn't gossip in the wind. And every morning at exactly 5:45, the kitchen light hums on like a sunrise. My days are quiet, but steady. I walk the neighborhood before the sun decides what to do with the Rockies. The knees make their usual protest. The shoulder grumbles when I reach too high. But the rhythm holds. Grind the beans, water the basil, wipe the counter until it squeaks. I make lists, real ones, with pen and paper, because nothing feels better than a box you can check. By the stove sits my wife's old wooden spoon, Elena's spoon. She's been gone 20 years now, but the handle remembers her grip. I keep it there for the same reason some folks keep a photograph, to remind me that love leaves fingerprints on the things it touches. She used to laugh at how serious I looked while cooking, said I could outstare a thunderstorm. Maybe I can. I know I can outweight one. You wouldn't guess it, but I can speak Italian. Not perfectly, not the way a professor would, but enough to understand the music of it. 40 years ago, before mortgages and parent-teacher conferences, I washed dishes in Florence. I saved for college one blister at a time, standing over sinks so big you could baptize a cow in them. That kitchen was my classroom. My Italian was born in steam, shouts, and the clatter of pans. It's rusty now, but not dead. My daughter, Lauren, grew up with two constants, patience and socket wrenches. She was only 6 when Elena passed. I raised her with steady hands and stubborn pride. She chased every branch higher, debate captain, city planner, the kind of woman who works late and never apologizes for it. My job was simple: be boring, be useful, and make sure she never felt the floor give way beneath her. I'll admit it. I have my quirks. My garden rows are straight as a ruler line. My dish towels fold into perfect thirds. I label things, sometimes twice. Lauren teases me, says I could alphabetize air. She's right. But she knows it's my way of keeping the world from rattling too loud. The Thursday everything changed. I was roasting chicken and parsnips. Lauren called 2 days earlier, her voice carrying that sparkle she gets when she's hiding good news. "Dad, I'm bringing someone," she said. "His name's Luca." She didn't have to say the rest. I'd heard that tone before. It painted her words in new colors. When they arrived, the December air followed them in. Luca Ferraro stepped through the doorway like a page from a magazine. Tailored jacket, shoes that had never met mud, smile polished as silver. He leaned in, kissed the air near my cheek, and said the house felt classic. People say classic when they don't know the right compliment but want to sound expensive. I'll be honest. At first, I liked him. Some men bulldoze fathers to show dominance. Luca didn't. He asked about the framed blueprint above my mantel. When I told him it was the school gym I designed in '94, he nodded with interest, like foundations mattered to him. He praised the chicken without sounding fake. He rolled up his sleeves and helped with the dishes. A convincer, yes, but not enough to set off alarms. Not yet. "Dad, be nice," Lauren whispered while we cleared the table. "I am nice," I said, half smiling. "Very nice," Luca added smoothly. "Your father is a gentleman." We drank coffee afterward. I brought out Cantucci and Vin Santo, a habit I kept from Florence. The house was warm, settled. The TV hummed softly with weather updates. The three of us sat there like a family sketch just beginning to take shape. For a moment, I let myself think maybe this was it. Maybe Lauren had found someone who'd hold her steady. But then, life has a way of cracking the frame when you least expect it. The city alert buzzed my phone. Winter storm possible. Lauren stepped into the hall to answer a work call. Luca drifted to the window, phone in hand, voice lowered. He spoke quickly, in Italian, careless in the way people get when they think no one can understand. An innocuo, he murmured, harmless. The Florence years unfolded in my head like a blueprint I hadn't looked at in decades. My ears sharpened. Ligata alla figlia, soldi di famiglia, residenza, 2 anni massimo. Attached to the daughter. Family money. Residency. 2 years at most. The words turned my blood to ice. When Lauren returned, Luca slipped his phone away, smiling again, the mask seamless. He asked me more about Italy, complimented my wine choice, brushed Lauren's hand with theatrical tenderness. Every movement was crafted, every look designed. And for the first time I saw the machinery behind it. We said goodnight at the door. Lauren hugged me, her eyes glowing. Luca shook my hand a heartbeat too long, his smile stretched. Grazie, Signor Morales, he said. Per tutto. Thank you, for everything. Prego, I answered evenly, my voice steady as a carpenter's level. After they left, I stood in the entry until the cold air stopped whispering through the crack. I washed the plates by hand. I dried them with the towel that never sheds. I set the spoon down gently. Then I pulled out a yellow pad, drew a square in the corner, and wrote one word inside: plan. I sat there in the quiet, chamomile steeping too long in the mug, and realized something. He thought I was harmless. He thought I was a gate to be held open. But I'm not a gate. The calm of my life had held for 66 years. But that calm was about to break. The calm broke sooner than I expected. Lauren called that Sunday, her voice bubbling with excitement. Dad, Luca wants to cook for us. He's making pasta from scratch. You've got to come. I agreed, of course. A father doesn't turn down an invitation like that, not when his daughter's happiness is spilling out of every word. But when I left the house, I packed more than my appetite. I packed patience. I packed silence. Because silence, used right, is sharper than a knife. Luca's apartment was spotless. Too spotless. White couch, glass table, not a book out of place. It looked like a showroom where people visit but don't live. He greeted me with a hug this time, as if we'd grown closer. His warmth was rehearsed, but Lauren beamed, so I let it slide. The sauce smelled good. Garlic, tomato, basil, an honest aroma masking a dishonest man. He tossed noodles with a flair that said performance. We sat down to eat, and he poured wine from a bottle that looked like it had been bought for the label, not the taste. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to wash my hands. The sink overlooked the balcony. That's when I saw him. Phone pressed to his ear, speaking low, his face turned toward the dark. I cracked the window just enough to let the words drift in. La figlia è innamorata chica. Tutto più facile. La casa del padre vale molto. The daughter is blind in love. Everything's easier. The father's house is worth a lot. My chest tightened. He wasn't even careful this time. When I walked back into the room, he was seated, smiling as if nothing had happened. Lauren was laughing at a story about his so-called childhood in Palermo. He turned to me, lifted his glass, and said in English, Signor Morales, tell us about your time in Italy. Florence, yes? Florence, I said, steady, and I still understand it. For a single beat, his smile faltered, a crack in the marble. Then it returned, smoother than before. Later that night, he and Lauren drove me home. She hugged me on the porch, her voice soft as candlelight. Dad, isn't he wonderful? I kissed her forehead. He makes a fine pasta, I said. Nothing more. Inside, I pulled out my yellow pad. 2 squares now filled. Plan. Timing. I drew a third and wrote truth. 3 days later, Daniel Cross sat across from me at the kitchen table, sliding a thin folder between us. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Your instincts are right. Ferraro isn't Ferraro. Inside were documents and photographs, marriage licenses, divorce filings, rental records under other names. One showed him outside a courthouse in Nevada with a woman in her 40s. Another, a smiling wedding announcement from Colorado. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. Both ended in financial wreckage. He's used at least 3 aliases, Daniel said. Always foreign, always romantic. Each time he follows the same script. Quick love, fast wedding, assets shifted, then gone. I studied the photos. My jaw tightened. And now it's my daughter. Daniel nodded. She fits the pattern. Exactly. That weekend I invited them again, this time to my house. I cooked lamb slow, the way Elena used to, the smell filling every corner like a shield. We ate, we talked, we played our parts. But every word he spoke, I weighed like steel on a scale. When Lauren stepped into the bathroom, Luca leaned closer, his tone dropping. "You ask too many questions, Senor Morales," he said softly, in accented English. "Too much suspicion makes family dinners uncomfortable." The room tilted. My blood cooled, but I didn't flinch. I leaned back, locked eyes with him, and said just as softly, "And too much arrogance makes mistakes easier." For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. His eyes hardened. Then Lauren returned, and the charm was back, smiling, pouring more wine, brushing her hand with tenderness. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as if its blades might carve answers. Lauren's laughter echoed in my ears, braided with his cold Italian words. He thought he'd fooled her completely. He thought he'd fooled me, but he was wrong. I rose in the dark, pulled out the yellow pad, and scribbled beneath truth. One more square. Trap. By morning, the path was clear. He was planning for a Christmas Eve proposal. He wanted sentiment, speed, and leverage. He thought it was his stage. I poured my coffee and made myself a promise. I'd let him think he was winning. Let him plan the proposal. Let him rehearse his lines. Let him bring in his fake parents with their rehearsed stories. But all the while, I'd be weaving my own net. I looked out the kitchen window, the snow beginning to fall, and whispered to the empty room. That's when I decided I wouldn't stay quiet. The night after I drew that fourth square on the yellow pad, sleep became a stranger. I sat in my study with stacks of old files. Contracts, tax records, mortgage papers. 40 years of my life packed in boxes that smelled of dust and ink. My late wife used to tease me about keeping everything, but now I was glad I had. Because when you're dealing with a man like Luca, or Christian, or whatever his real name was, you need to know where your walls are, how thick they are, and what parts could crack. I stared at those papers and thought of Lauren. She was 6 when Elena died. Too young to lose a mother, too old not to notice. I raised her with steady hands, making peanut butter sandwiches just the way she liked, pulling her hair into uneven pigtails, working overtime to pay tuition without letting her see the strain. She never saw me break, not once. And I thought that meant I had done my job. Now one slick man with a smile and a well-tied tie had her ready to hand over her future, and maybe her savings, maybe even the house I built my life around. The thought hollowed me out. The next morning, Lauren called. Her voice was so full of joy it nearly broke me. "Dad, thanks again for dinner. Luca loved it. He says you remind him of his grandfather." "Isn't that sweet?" "Sweet." The words sat in my throat like a stone. "Very sweet," I answered, steady as I could. She went on about holiday plans. How Luca's parents were eager to meet me. How they wanted to come for Christmas. Her voice was painted with hope. "Sounds wonderful," I said. When I hung up, my hand lingered on the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. The days blurred. I tried to focus on chores, sweeping the garage, fixing a squeaky hinge, but I kept drifting to boxes of Lauren's childhood. Her first bike helmet, her science fair ribbons, the photos of her graduation. Every memory cut deeper. I saw her face at age 9 when she won first place at school. At 16, beaming in her debate blazer. At 22, clutching her diploma with both hands like it might float away. And now, all of that, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar stretched to keep her afloat, was at risk of being swallowed by a fraud. The sting burned worse at night. The house, usually quiet in a comforting way, felt empty, cold. The wooden spoon by the stove looked lonelier than I could stand. I'd pour chamomile, let it go cold, and just sit there listening to the furnace breathe. More than once, I thought about telling her everything, calling her, laying the folder down in front of her and saying, "Look, he's lying to you." But each time I saw her face in my mind, hardening against me, accusing me of being jealous, controlling, stuck in the past. She'd defend him. She'd push me away. and that was his sharpest weapon. Not the fake names, not the lies, but the wedge he was driving between me and my daughter. One evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out a photo album. The kind with yellowing pages and glue that smells faintly of time. I flipped through her life. The sacrifices screamed from the margins. The overtime shifts. The nights I ate peanut butter so she could eat chicken. The years I patched my old truck instead of buying new so she'd never feel the pinch. Parents make sacrifices so their children never have to see the cracks. And yet here she was, about to hand her life to a man who saw her as a line on a calendar, 2 years at most. My chest ached with the insult. But then something shifted. That bitterness, that hollow ache, turned into fuel. I realized despair was what he wanted. Silence was his ally. If I surrendered, he'd win without ever lifting a finger. Instead, I began to think. Carefully, methodically, like an engineer faced with a failing structure. I had resources, a lifetime of patience, a mind trained to calculate stress and load, friends and colleagues who owed me favors, and one old contact in government who once told me, "Ed, if life ever hands you a crooked beam, call me." I didn't need anger. I didn't need noise. I needed precision. I closed the album, picked up the yellow pad, and drew another square. Inside it, in neat block letters, I wrote, "Counterweight." The trap wouldn't be rushed. It would be built slow, steady, quiet. And as the clock ticked on, I knew this wasn't just about saving my daughter from heartbreak. This was about teaching a man who thought fathers were harmless, that some of us still know how to fight, not with fists, but with patience and leverage. The fallout had nearly broken me. But now, it had given me purpose. The morning after I wrote counterweight on that yellow pad, I felt sharper than I had in weeks. My hands still ached, my back still groaned when I stood, but my mind was alive again. An old lesson returned to me. When I worked construction, we used to say, "If you can't lift the beam, build a pulley." That was what I needed, a pulley for this problem. A way to use leverage, not force. So I started with the first tool I trusted most, silence. Lauren thought I was busy with Christmas shopping, with neighborhood errands. In reality, I was meeting with an old friend, Harold Kim, a retired customs officer who still had contacts in the right places. We sat in a booth at a diner, coffee steaming between us, and I laid it out plain. "There's a man, says his name is Christian Marchesi, claims he's from Milan. I need to know if that's true." Harold stirred his coffee slow. "Do you think he's after your daughter?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." He nodded. "Give me what you have. A copy of his passport. Any details. I'll see what shakes loose." I slid the envelope across the table. A photocopy of Christian's ID, which I'd borrowed when he left his coat hanging during dinner. It felt risky, but necessary. Harold pocketed it without another word. The second pulley was closer to home, a lawyer I trusted. I'd updated my will after Elena died, making sure Lauren would be secure no matter what. But now I needed guardrails. Property transfers locked tight, financial accounts shielded, assets moved into trusts that couldn't be touched by a smooth-talking foreigner. My attorney raised an eyebrow as he drew up the paperwork. "You're building walls, Ed, thick ones." "That's the point," I said. By the time I left his office, my estate was no longer an open pasture. It was a fortress. Christian could marry my daughter, but he'd find nothing to plunder. And still, I knew walls alone wouldn't stop him. Wolves find new doors. That's when I leaned on the third pulley, information. Remember, I'd heard him speak in Italian. That wasn't just insult, it was evidence. So I did something that would have made Elena laugh. I signed up for a refresher course in Italian at the local community center. On the surface, it looked like an old man trying to rekindle an old hobby. But in truth, I was sharpening my ear, getting ready for the day when Christian thought he was safe enough to speak freely again. And believe me, I would be listening. The days moved fast now. Christmas lights went up around the neighborhood, wreaths on doors, carols drifting from radios. But inside me, every tick of the clock was a countdown. Because I'd learned something from Harold. He called me 3 nights later. Ed, your fiancé's paperwork doesn't hold water. Passport's real, but the man using it isn't. The real Christian Marchesi is alive and well in Rome, married, kids, works in finance. The guy sitting at your table, he's a fraud. Stolen identity, clear as day. I gripped the phone hard enough to ache. You're certain? As certain as ink on paper. You're not just dealing with a bad fiancé, Ed. You're dealing with a professional scammer. That was my suspense reset. Proof. Hard proof. And it changed everything. Now I could have run to Lauren, shoved the evidence in her hands, and begged her to believe me. But I remembered the look on her face that night at dinner, the way she glowed when Christian brushed her hand. She was blind with love, or at least with what she thought was love. If I exposed him too soon, she'd side with him. I'd be painted as the bitter old man, jealous of losing his daughter. And that's exactly what he was counting on. So no, I wouldn't confront her yet. I'd let him dig his own grave. I called Harold back. Keep watching him, quietly. If he sneezes, I want to know. Then I called my lawyer again. Draft one more document. I want full control over the family home, ironclad. If anyone tries to access it through Lauren, block it. And finally, I called in a bigger net. A contact Harold recommended. An investigator who had pulled apart scams like this before. When Marcus Webb sat in my kitchen a week later, plain as a tax clerk with his manila folder, he laid the blueprint bare. This man isn't who he says he is. He's worked this scam before. Different names, same methods. Marriage for status. Divorce for assets. He counts on families like yours being too polite, too trusting, too slow. The trick is to let him think he's ahead. Right up until he isn't. I leaned back in my chair. So how do we set the table? Marcus smiled. Simple. We let him sit down first. That phrase echoed in my head for days. Let him sit down first. And that became my final pulley. I knew he and his so-called parents were planning to visit before Christmas. I knew a proposal was coming. I knew, because Lauren couldn't hide her excitement, that it would happen on Christmas Eve. Romantic timing. Emotional leverage. Fine. Let it happen. Let him walk into my house, sit at my table, pour my wine. Because that's where I'd be waiting. With Harold, with Marcus, with the evidence, with the authorities on call. He thought calling me a cow in Italian made me harmless. But he was wrong. The table wasn't just set for Christmas dinner. It was set for justice. Everything was ready. All I needed was the right moment. Christmas Eve arrived like a loaded gun. The house glowed with soft lights, candles flickering against the windows, roast lamb warming in the oven. From the outside, it looked like any other holiday evening. From the inside, I knew it was the stage where everything would finally break. At 6 sharp, headlights cut across my driveway. I saw Lauren's silhouette in the passenger seat, laughing at something. And beside her, smooth as ever, Christian, my daughter's fiancé, wearing a suit far too expensive for a man with his supposed background. I opened the door with a smile practiced in the mirror. Merry Christmas, you two. Lauren hugged me tight.
Dad, it smells amazing.
Luca's been looking forward to this all week. Christian bent to kiss my cheek, European style. His cologne was sharp, overpowering, meant to project confidence. Buonasera, Signor Hale, he said warmly. It is always a pleasure to see you. But his eyes flickered to the table, then to the side room, calculating, as always. Dinner began like a performance. Lauren chatted about work, about childhood memories, her voice bright and oblivious. Christian was the perfect actor, nodding at the right places, laughing softly, even praising my cooking. You remind me of my grandmother, he said in Italian, smooth as silk. But when he thought I wasn't listening, he added under his breath, though your table manners, old cow, are less refined. My pulse quickened. My Italian classes had paid off. He thought he was untouchable, speaking freely in the language of his lies. I poured the wine. My hand was steady. Halfway through the main course, a knock came at the door. Ah, I said, standing. A holiday visitor. Don't mind if I bring them in. Christian frowned, but Lauren just smiled, oblivious. I opened the door, and in walked Marcus Webb, the investigator, dressed like any neighbor in a winter coat, Behind him, Agent Sarah Chen, crisp and professional, her smile polite but firm. Old friends, I explained casually. I thought they might join us for dessert. Christian stiffened, just for a second, but then his mask returned. The more the merrier, he said smoothly, though I saw his knuckles whiten around his fork. Dessert was served. Coffee poured. Conversation carefully steered. And just when Christian leaned back, confident again, Agent Chen set down her cup. Mr. Marchesi, she said, voice calm. Or should I say Mr. Russo, Mr. Conti, or perhaps Mr. Alvarez? You've used so many names, it's difficult to keep track. The fork froze halfway to his mouth. Lauren blinked. What are you talking about? Christian chuckled nervously. This must be some mistake. Marcus slid a folder onto the table, photographs spilling out. Christian at a courthouse in Nevada, at a wedding in Colorado, at a cafe in Miami. Different names, different women, same face. My daughter's eyes darted from the photos to the man she thought she loved. Luca, what is this? Lies, he snapped quickly. These are doctored, don't listen. But Agent Chen cut him off, her badge flashing in the candlelight. Christian, or whatever name you prefer, you are under arrest for immigration fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of marriage fraud. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Christian's mask shattered. His Italian accent slipped away like a costume tossed aside. He spoke in flat, perfect American English. You think you've trapped me, old man? His voice was cold, venomous. All you've done is ruin your daughter's life. Do you think she'll ever forgive you for this humiliation? Lauren gasped, tears filling her eyes. You're American? He smirked. Of course I am. Did you really think some charming European stranger would fall for you so easily? You were a mark, Lauren, just like the others. 2 years, a divorce, a settlement, and I'd be gone. The cruelty landed like a slap across her face. I spoke then for the first time all evening, my voice steady. You called me a cow in Italian. Thought I wouldn't understand. You thought I was harmless. But you made a mistake, Christian. You underestimated a father. He snarled, tried to rise, but Agent Chen was already at his side. The cuffs clicked, the sound sharp and final. You'll pay for this, he spat as she led him to the door. Both of you. You've destroyed her trust. She'll hate you for the rest of your life. And then the door shut. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Lauren sat motionless, staring at the folder Marcus had left open on the table. Photographs, bank transfers, fake documents. Proof that the man she'd planned to marry had never been real. Finally, she whispered, Dad, how long have you known? I swallowed hard. Since the night he insulted me in Italian. Since I heard him call you a mark. I didn't want to believe it, but every word after that confirmed it. I couldn't let him destroy you. Her face twisted, grief, betrayal, anger, all at once. You should have told me. I wanted to. But he'd already poisoned the well. If I'd warned you, you would have defended him. You wouldn't have believed me. I had to show you. Her eyes brimmed with tears. And now, he's gone. And you're safe. That's all that matters. We sat there in silence, the Christmas lights blinking softly in the corner. And in that silence, I finally felt free. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, but lingers like smoke after a fire. The roast lamb sat cold on the table. The pie, untouched. The wine glasses half full, abandoned mid-sip. Christmas Eve was supposed to be about warmth, laughter, and tradition. Instead, it had become a night of revelation, betrayal, and handcuffs. I thought of Lauren's face when the truth landed. The way her eyes widened, the way her lips trembled. Not just from heartbreak, but from the realization that her father had known and kept it from her. That hurt may take years to heal. And yet, I'd do it again. Because the alternative, the wedding, the green card, the slow bleed of her spirit and her savings, would have left wounds far deeper than mistrust. That's the cruel part of protection. Sometimes, it looks like betrayal in the moment. Sometimes, saving someone means letting them hate you first. I sat there long after the door closed, staring at the evidence folder Marcus had left behind. Christian's other names, his other wives, his other victims. 7 families broken before us. We had stopped him from making Lauren the 8th. I whispered the words that started it all, as if speaking them aloud could seal the lesson. My daughter's fiancé called me a cow in Italian, and 8 days later, I set the table for his arrest. Absurd, maybe. But behind those words was a truth I'll carry until my last breath. Respect isn't given. It's guarded. Dignity isn't demanded. It's earned. And patience, the kind born of years, of losses, of learning when to act and when to wait, is sharper than anger will ever be. I don't know how long it will take Lauren to forgive me, but I do know one thing: she is safe. And safety, even when it feels bitter, is the greatest gift a father can give. Would you have handled it the way I did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories of hard-earned wisdom and quiet payback speak to you, subscribe for the next one.